んばんは。今回は Dracula を読み続けたいです。I want to continue reading Dracula tonight. I was gonna do a light novel, but I was gonna work on my light novel, but I want to read. I haven't read this in a while. I would like to finish it one day. いつかこの小説を読み終えたいです。I'm reading this in English. 英語で読みます。I would like to do other books too. I would like to read other books too. I have a few in mind. I'm gonna start in a little bit. I had the book set up, the online book. I was able to get that ready. I have water. Let's start. That's good. Is it? Okay. I'm making sure you can't see the cursor. It was just a quarter before 12. Oh, chapter 16, Dr. Seward's diary continued. It was just a quarter before 12 o'clock when we got into the churchyard over the low wall. The night was dark with occasional gleams of moonlight between the rents of the heavy clouds that scudded across the sky. We all kept somehow close together, with Van Helsing slightly in front as he led the way. When we had come close to the tomb, I looked well at Arthur, for I feared that the proximity to a place laden with so sorrowful a memory would upset him. But he bore himself well. I took it that the very mystery of the proceeding was in some way a counteractant to his grief. The professor unlocked the door, and seeing a natural hesitation amongst us, for various reasons, solved the difficulty by entering first himself. The rest of us followed, and he closed the door. He then lit a dark lantern and pointed to the coffin. Arthur stepped forward hesitatingly. Van Helsing said to me, You were with me here yesterday. Was the body of Miss Lucy in that coffin? It was. The professor turned to the rest, saying, You hear, and yet there is no one who does not believe me with me. He took his screwdriver and again took off the lid of the coffin. Arthur looked on, very pale but silent, and when the lid was removed, he stepped forward. He evidently did not know that there was a leaden coffin, or at any rate had not thought of it. When he saw the rent in the lead, the blood rushed to his face for an instant, but as quickly fell again, so that he remained of a ghastly whiteness. He was still silent. Van Helsing forced back the leaden flange, and he looked in and recoiled. The coffin was empty. For several minutes no one spoke a word. The silence was broken by Quincy Morris. Professor, I answered, for you. Your word is all I want. I wouldn't ask such a thing ordinarily, and I wouldn't dishonor you as to imply a doubt. But this is a mystery that goes beyond any honor or dishonor. Is this your doing? I swear to you by all that I hold sacred, that I have not removed nor touched her. What happened was this. 2 nights ago, my friend Seward and I came here, with good purpose. Believe me, I opened that coffin, which was then sealed up, and we found in it is now empty. We then waited and saw something white come through the trees. The next day we came here in the daytime, and she lay there. Did she not, friend John? Yes. That night we were just in time. One more so small child was missing, and we find it, thank God, unharmed amongst the graves. Yesterday I came here before sundown, for at sundown the undead can move. I waited here all the night, till the sun rose, but I saw nothing. It was most probable that it was because I had laid over the clamps of those doors garlic, which the undead cannot bear, and other things which they shun. Last night there was no exodus, so tonight before the sundown I took away my garlic and other things, and so it is we find this coffin empty. But bear with me, though there is much that is strange. Wait you with me outside. Unseen and unheard things much stranger are yet to be. So, here he shut the dark side of his lantern. Now, to the outside. He opened the door, and we filed out, he coming last, and locking the door behind him. Oh, gotcha. Oh dear. Oh, but it seemed fresh and pure in the night. After the terror of that vault, how sweet it was to see the clouds race by, and the passing gleams of the moonlight between the scudding clouds crossing and passing. Like the gladness and sorrow of a man's life, how sweet it was to breathe the fresh air that had no taint of death and decay. How humanizing to see the red lighting of the sky beyond the hill, and how to hear far away the muffled roar that marks the life of a great city. Each in his own way, solemn and overcome, Arthur was silent, and I could see, trying to grasp the purpose and the inner meanings of the mystery. I was myself tolerably patient, and half inclined to throw aside doubt and accept Van Helsing's conclusions. Quincy Morris was phlegmatic in the way of a man who accepts all things, and accepts them in the spirit of cool bravery. With hazard of all, he has to stake. Not being able to smoke, he cut himself a good-sized plug of tobacco and began to chew. As to Van Helsing, he was employed in a definite way. First he took from his bag a mass of what looked like thin, wafer-like biscuit, which was carefully rolled up in a white napkin. Next he took out a double handful of some whitish, like dough or putty. He crumpled the wafer up fine, and worked into the mass between his hands. This he then took, and rolling it into thin strips, began to lay them into the crevices between the door and setting it in the tomb. I was somewhat puzzled at this, and being close, asked him what it was he was doing. Arthur and Quincy drew near also, as they too were curious. He answered, "I am closing the tomb so that the undead may not enter." "And is that stuff you have put there going to do it?" asked Quincy. "Great Scott, is this a game?" "It is." "What is that which you are using?" This time the question was by Arthur. Van Helsing reverently lifted his hat as he answered, "The host. I bought it from Amsterdam. I have an indulgence." It was an answer that appalled the most skeptical of us, and we felt individually that in the presence of such earnest purpose as the professor's, a purpose which could thus use the to him most sacred of things, it was impossible to distrust. In respectful silence, we took the places assigned to us close round the tomb, but hidden from the sight of anyone approaching. I pitied the others, especially Arthur. I had myself been apprenticed by my former visits to the watching horror, and yet I, who had up to an hour ago repudiated the proofs, felt my heart sink within me. Never did tombs look so ghastly white. Never did cypress or yew or juniper seem the embodiment of funeral gloom. Never did tree or grass wave or rustle so ominously. Never did bow the creek so mysteriously. Never did the faraway howling of dogs send such woeful presage through the night. There was a long spell of silence, a big aching void, and then from the professor a keen tss. He pointed, and far down the avenue of yews, he saw a white figure advance. A dim white figure, which held something dark at its breast. The figure stopped. At the moment, a ray of moonlight fell upon the masses of driving clouds, and showed in startling prominence a dark-haired woman, dressed in the cerements of the grave. We could not see the face, for it was bent down over what we saw to be a fair-haired child. There was a pause and a little sharp cry, such as a child gives in sleep, or a dog as it lies before the fire in dreams. We were starting forward, but the professor's warning hand, seen by us as he stood behind a yew tree, kept us back. And then, as we looked forward, the white figure moved forwards again. It was now near enough for us to see clearly, and the moonlight still held. My own heart grew cold as ice, and I could hear the gasp of Arthur, as we recognized the features of Lucy Westenra. Lucy Westenra, but yet hell changed. Sweetness was turned to an adamant, heartless cruelty, and the purity to voluptuous wantonness. Van Helsing stepped out, and obedient to his gesture, we all advanced too. The four of us ranged in line before the door of the tomb. Van Helsing raised his lantern, and drew the slide. By the concentrated light that fell on Lucy's face, we could see that the lips were crimson with fresh blood, and that the stream had trickled over her chin and stained the purity of her long death robe. We shuddered with horror. I could see by the tremulous light that even Van Helsing's iron nerve had failed. Arthur was next to me, and if I had not seized his arm and held him up, he would have fallen. When Lucy, I call the thing that was before us Lucy because it bore her shape, saw us, she drew back with an angry snarl, such as a cat gives when it taken unawares. Then her eyes ranged over us. Lucy's eyes in form and color, but Lucy's eyes unclean and full of hellfire, instead of the pure, gentle orbs we knew. In that moment, the remnant of my love passed into hate and loathing. Had she then to be killed, I could have done it with savage delight. As she looked, her eyes blazed with unholy light, and the face became wreathed with a voluptuous smile. Oh God, how it made me shudder to see it. With a careless motion, she flung to the ground, callous as a devil, the child that, up to now, she had clutched strenuously to her breast, growling over it, as a dog growls over a bone. The child gave a sharp cry and lay there moaning. There was a cold bloodedness in the act which wrung a groan from Arthur. Then she advanced to him, with outstretched arms and wanton smile. He fell back and hid his face in his hands. She still advanced, however, with a languorous, voluptuous grace, said, "Come to me, Arthur. Leave these others and come to me. My arms are hungry for you. Come, and we can rest together. Come, my husband, come." There was something diabolically sweet in her tone, something of the tingling of glass when struck, which rang through the brains, even of us who had heard these words addressed to another. As for Arthur, he seemed under a spell. Moving his hand from his face, he opened wide his arms. He was leaping for them. Van Helsing sprang forward and held between them a little golden crucifix. She recoiled from it, and with a suddenly distorted face full of rage, dashed past him as if to enter the tomb. When within a foot or two of the door, however, she stopped, as if arrested by some irresistible force. Then she turned, and her face was shown in the clear burst of moonlight, and by the lamp, which had now no quiver from Van Helsing's iron nerves. Never did I see such baffled malice on a face, and never I trust shall it ever be seen again by mortal eyes. The beautiful color became livid. The eyes seemed to throw out a sparkle of hellfire. The brows were wrinkled as though the folds of the flesh were the coils of Medusa's snakes, and the lovely blood-stained mouth grew to an open square, as in the passion of masks of the Greeks and Japanese. If ever our face met death, if looks could kill, we saw it at that moment. And so for full half a minute, which seemed an eternity, she remained between the lifted crucifix and the sacred closing of her means of entry. Van Helsing broke the silence by asking Arthur, "Answer me, oh my friend, am I to proceed in my work?" Arthur threw himself on his knees and hid his face in his hands as he answered, "Do as you will, friend. Do as you will. There could be no horror like this anymore. And he groaned in spirit. Quincy and I simultaneously moved towards him and took his arms. We could hear the click of the closing lantern as Van Helsing held it down, coming close to the tomb. He began to remove the chinks of some of the sacred emblem, which he had placed there. We all looked in horrified amazement as they saw, when he stood back, the woman with the corporeal body, as real as that moment as her own, pass in through the interstice where scarce a knife blade could have gone. We all felt a glad sense of relief when we saw the professor calmly restoring the strings of putty to the edges of the door. When this was done, he lifted the child and said, "Come now, my friends, we can do no more till tomorrow. There was a funeral at noon, so here we shall all come before long after that." The friends of the dead will all be gone by 2, and when the sexton lock of the gates shall remain, then there is more to do, but not like this tonight, for this little one, he has not much harm, and by tomorrow night he shall be well. We shall leave him here where the police will find him, as on the other night, and then go home. Coming close to Arthur, he said, "My friend Arthur, you..." Why? Wait, what? "My friend Arthur, you have had a sore trial, but after, when you look back, you will see how it was necessary. You are now in the bitter waters, my child. By this time tomorrow, you will please God. You have passed them, and have drunk of the sweet waters, so do not mourn over much. Till then, I shall not ask you to forgive me." Arthur and Quincy came home with me, and we tried to cheer each other on the way. We had left the child in safety, and were tired, so we all slept with more or less reality of sleep. 29th of September, night. A little before 12 o'clock, we three, Arthur, Quincy Morris, and myself, called for the professor. It was odd to notice that by common consent, we had all put on black clothes. Of course, Arthur wore black for he was in deep mourning, but the rest of us wore it by instinct. We got to the churchyard by 1:30 and strolled about, keeping out of official observation. But when the grave diggers had completed their task, the sexton, under the belief that everyone had gone, had locked the gate, we had the place all to ourselves. Van Helsing, instead of his little black bag, had with him a long leather one, something like a cricketing bag. It was manifestingly of fair weight. When we were alone and had heard the last of the footsteps die out up the road, we silently, and as if by ordered intention, followed the professor to the tomb. He unlocked the door, and we entered, closing it behind us. Then he took from his bag the lantern which he lit, and also 2 wax candles, which, when lighted, he struck by melting their ends on the coffin so that they might give light sufficient to work by. When he again lifted the lid off Lucy's coffin, we all looked. Arthur trembling like an aspen, and saw the body lay there in all its death beauty. But there was no love in my own heart, nothing but loathing for the foul thing which had taken Lucy's shape without her soul. I could see even Arthur's face grow hard as he looked. Presently he said to Van Helsing, "Is this really Lucy's body, or only a demon in her shape? It is her body, and yet not it. But wait a while, and you will all see her as she was and is." She seemed like a nightmare of Lucy. As she lay there, the pointed teeth, the blood-stained voluptuous mouth, which it then made one shudder to see, the whole carnal and unspiritual appearance, seeming like a devilish mockery of Lucy's sweet purity. Van Helsing, with his usual methodicalness, began taking the various contents from his bag and placing them ready for use. First he took out a soldering iron and some plumbing solder, and then a small oil lamp, which gave out when lit in a corner of the tomb. Gas which burned at a fierce heat, with a blue flame. Then his operating knives, which he placed to hand, and a last round wooden stake, some 2.5 or 3 inches thick, and about 3 feet long. One end of it was hardened by charring in the fire, and was sharpened to a fine point. With this stake came a heavy hammer, such as in households is used in the coal cellar for breaking the lumps. To me, a doctor's preparations for work of any kind are stimulating and bracing, but the effects of these things on both Arthur and Quincy was to cause them a sort of consternation. They both, however, kept their courage and remained silent and quiet. When all was ready, Van Helsing said, "Before we do anything, let me tell you, it is out of the lore and experience of the ancients, and of all those who have studied the powers of the undead. When they become such, there comes with the change of the curse of immortality. They cannot die. They must go on age after age, adding new victims and multiplying the evils of the world. For all that die from the preying of the undead becomes themselves undead and prey on their kind. And so the circle goes on ever widening, like as the ripples from a stone thrown in the water. Friend Arthur, if you had met that kiss which you know of before poor Lucy died, or again, last night when you opened your arms to her, you would in time, when you had died, have become Nosferatu, as they call it in Eastern Europe, and would all time make more of those undeads that so have filled us with horror. The career of this so unhappy dear lady is just begun. Those children whose blood she suck are not as yet so much of the worst, but if she live on undead more and more, they lose their body by her power over them. They come to her, so she draw their blood, so wicked mouth, but if she die in truth, then all cease. The tiny wounds of their throat disappear, and they go back to their plays, unknowing ever of what has been. But of the most blessed of all, when this sound undead be made to rest as true dead, then the soul of the poor lady, whom we all shall love again, be free, instead of working wickedness by night and growing more debased in the assimilating of it by day." She shall take her place with the other angels, so that, my friend, it will be a blessed hand for her that shall strike the blow that sets her free. To this I am willing, but there is none amongst us who has a better right. Will it be no joy to think of hereafter in the silence of the night, when sleep is not? It was my hand that sent her to the stars. It was the hand of him that loved her best. The hand that of all she would have herself chosen, had it been her to choose. Tell me, if there be such a one among us? We all looked at Arthur. He saw, too, what we all did, the infinite kindness which suggested that his should be the hand which should restore Lucy to us as a holy and not an unholy memory. He stepped forward and said bravely, though his hand trembled and his face was as pale as snow, "My true friend, from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of my broken heart, I thank you. Tell me what I am to do. I shall not falter." Van Helsing laid a hand on his shoulder and said, "Brave lad, a moment's courage, and it is done. The stake must be driven through her. It will be a fearful ordeal. Be not deceived in that. But it will be only a short time, and you will then rejoice more than your pain was great. From this grim tomb you will emerge, as though you tread on air. But you must not falter. Once again you have begun. Once you have begun, only think that we, your true friends, are around you, and that we pray for you all the time." "Go on," said Arthur hoarsely. "Tell me what I am to do." "Take this stake in your left hand, ready to place the point over the heart, and the hammer in your right. Then when we begin our prayer for the dead, I shall read him, and have here the book, and that the others shall follow. Strike in God's name, so that all may be well with the dead that we love, and that the undead pass away." Arthur took the stake and the hammer. Once his mind was set on action, his hands never trembled, or even quivered. Van Helsing opened his missal and began to read, and Quincy and I followed as well as we could. Arthur placed the point over the heart, and as I looked, I could see its dint in the white flesh. He struck it with all his might. The thing in the coffin writhed, and a hideous blood-curdling screech came from the opened red lips. The body shook and quivered and twisted in wild contortions. The sharp white teeth champed together till the lips were cut, and the mouth was smeared with crimson foam. But Arthur never faltered. He looked like a figure of Thor, and his untrembling arm rose and fell, driving deeper and deeper the mercy-bearing stake, whilst the blood from the pierced heart welled and spurted up around. His face was set, and the duty seemed to shine through it. The sight of it gave us courage, so that our voices seemed to ring through the little vault. And then the writhing and quivering of the body became less, and the teeth seemed to champ, and the face to quiver. Finally, it lay still. The terrible task was over. The hammer fell from Arthur's hand. He reeled and would have fallen had we not caught him. The great drops of sweat sprang from his forehead, and his breath came in broken gasps. It had been an awful strain on him, had he not been forced to his task by more than human considerations. He could never have gone through with it. For a few minutes we were so taken up with him that we did not look towards the coffin. When we did, however, a murmur of startled surprise sprang from one to the other of us. We gazed so eagerly that Arthur rose, for he had been seated on the ground, and came and looked too. Then a glad, strange light broke over his face, and dispelled altogether the gloom of horror that lay upon it. There in the coffin lay no longer the foul thing that we had so dreaded and grown to hate. That the work of her destruction was yielded as a privilege to the one best entitled to it. But Lucy, as we had seen her in her life, with her face unequaled sweetness and purity, knew that they were there, as we had seen them in life, the traces of care and pain and waste. But these were all dear to us, for they marked her truth that we all knew to what we knew. One and all, we felt that the holy calm that lay like sunshine over the wasted face, and form was only an earthly token, and symbol of the calm that was reigned forever. Van Helsing came and laid his hand on Arthur's shoulder and said to him, "And now, Arthur, my friend, dear lad, am I not forgiven?" The reaction of the terrible strain came as he took the old man's hand into his and, raising it to his lips, pressed it and said, "Forgiven. God bless you, that you have given my dear one her soul again, and me peace." He put his hands on the professor's shoulder and, laying his hand on his breast, cried for a while silently, whilst he stood unmoving. When he raised his head, Van Helsing said to him, "And now, my child, you may kiss her dead lips, if you will, as she would have you to. If for her to choose, for she is not a grinning devil now, not any more a foul thing, for all eternity, no more she is the devil's undead. She is God's true dead, which soul is with him." Arthur bent and kissed her, and then we sent him and Quincy out of the tomb. The professor saw, and I saw, the top of the stake, leaving the point of it in the body. Then we cut off the head and filled the mouth with garlic. We soldered the lead-in coffin, screwed on the coffin lid, and gathering up our belongings, came away. When the professor locked the door, he gave the key to Arthur. Outside, the air was sweet. The sun shone and the birds sang, and it seemed as if all nature were turned to a different pitch. There was gladness and mirth and peace everywhere, for we were at rest ourselves. On one account we were glad, though it was a tempered joy. Before we moved away, Van Helsing said, "Now, my friends, one step of our work is done, and the most harrowing to ourselves. But there remains a greater task, to find out the author of all this, our sorrow, and to stamp him out. I have clues which we can follow, but it is a long task and a difficult, and there is danger in it, and pain. Shall you not all help me? You have learned to believe, all of us, is it not so?" And since so, do we not see our duty? Yes. And do we not promise to go on to the bitter end? Each in turn we took his hand, and the promise was made. Then said the professor, as we moved off, "Tonight, since you shall meet with me and dine together at 7 of the clock with friend John, I shall entreat to others, too, that you know not as yet, and I shall be ready to all our work show and our plans unfold. Friend John, you come with me home, for I have much to consult about, and you can help me tonight. For tonight I leave for Amsterdam, but I shall return tomorrow, and then begins our great quest. But first I shall have much to say, so that you may know what it is to do, to dread. Then our promise shall be made to each other anew. For there is a terrible task before us, and that once our feet are on the plowshare, we must not draw back." Chapter 17. Dr. Seward's diary continued. I need a drink. Ah. Okay. When we arrived at the Berkeley Hotel, Van Helsing found a telegram waiting for him. "I'm coming up by train. Jonathan at Whitby. Important news. Mina Harker." The professor was delighted. "Ah, that wonderful Madame Mina," he said. "Pearl among women. She arrived, but I cannot stay. She must go to your house, friend John. You must meet her at the station. Telegraph her en route, so that she may be prepared." When the wire was dispatched, we had a cup of tea. Over it, he told me of a diary kept by Jonathan Harker when abroad, and gave me a typewritten copy of it, also of Mrs. Harker's diary with me. "Take these," he said, "and study them well. When I have returned, you will be master of all the facts. We can then better enter on our inquisition. Keep them safe, for there is in them much treasure. You will need all your faith, even you who have such an experience of that today. What is here told," he laid his hand heavily and gravely on the packet of papers as he spoke, "may be the beginning of the end to you and me and many another. Or it may sound the knell of the undead who walk the earth. Read all, I pray you, with the open mind. And if you can add in any way the story here told, do so, for it is all important. You have kept diary of all the strange things, is it not so? Yes, then we shall go through all these together when we meet." He then made ready for his departure, and shortly after drove off to Liverpool Street. I took my way to Paddington, where I arrived about 15 minutes before the train came in. The crowd melted away after the bustling fashion common to arrival platforms, and I was beginning to feel uneasy lest I might miss my guest, when a sweet-faced, dainty-looking girl stepped up to me, and after a quick glance said, "Dr. Seward, is it not? You are Mrs. Harker." I answered at once, whereupon she held out her hand. "I knew you from the description of poor dear Lucy." But she stopped suddenly, and a quick blush overspread her face. The blush that rose to my own cheeks somehow set us both at ease, but it was a tacit answer to her own. I got our luggage, which included a typewriter, and we took the underground to Fenchurch Street. After I had sent a wire to my housekeeper to have a sitting room and bedroom prepared at once for Mrs. Harker. In due time, we arrived. She knew, of course, that the place was a lunatic asylum, but I could see that she was unable to repress a shudder when we entered. She told me that if she might, she would come presently to my study, as she had much to say. So here I am finishing my entry in my phonograph diary, whilst I await her. As yet I have not had the chance of looking at the papers which Van Helsing left with me, though they lie open before me. I must get her interested in something so that I may have an opportunity of reading them. She does not know how precious time is, or what a task we have in hand. I must be careful not to frighten her. Here she is. "29th of September. Mina Harker's journal." Okay. Need a drink. Okay. After I had tidied myself, I went down to Dr. Seward's study. At the door, I paused a moment, for I thought I heard him talking with someone. As, however, I had pressed me to be quick, I knocked at the door, and on his calling out, "Come in," I entered. To my intense surprise, there was no one with him. He was quite alone, and on the table opposite him was what I knew at once from the description to be a phonograph. I had never seen one, and was much interested. "I hope I did not keep you waiting," I said. "But I stayed at the door. I heard you talking to... and I thought there was someone with you." Oh, he replied with a smile. I was only entering in my diary. Your diary? I asked him in surprise. Yes, he answered. I keep them in this. As he spoke, he laid his hand on the phonograph. I felt quite excited over it, and I blurted out, Why, this beats even shorthand. May I hear it say something? Certainly, he replied with alacrity, and stood up, put it in train for speaking. Then he paused, and a trouble looked over, spread his face. The fact is, he began awkwardly, I only keep my diary in it. And as it is entirely, almost entirely, about my cases, it may be awkward. That is, I mean... He stopped, and I tried to help him out of his embarrassment. You helped put down dear Lucy at the end. Let me hear how she died. For all that I know of her, I shall be very grateful. She was very, very dear to me. To my surprise, he answered, with a horror-struck look in his face, Tell you of her death? Not for the wide world. Why not? I asked, for some grave, terrible feeling was coming over me. Again he paused, and I could see that he was trying to invent an excuse. At length, he stammered out, You see, I do not know how to pick out any particular part of the diary. Even while he was speaking, and an idea dawned upon him. He said with an unconscious simplicity of a different voice, with the naivety of a child, That's quite true. Upon my honor, honest Indian, I could not but smile, at which he grimaced. I gave myself away that time, he said, but do you know that, although I have kept a diary for months past, it never once struck me how I was going to find any particular part of it, in case I wanted to look it up? By this time, my mind was made up that the diary of a doctor who attended Lucy might have something to add to some of our knowledge of that terrible being. I said boldly, Then, Dr. Seward, you would better let me copy it for you on my typewriter. He grew to a positively deathly pallor as he said, No. For all the world, I wouldn't let you do that. Know that terrible story. Then it was terrible. My intuition was right. For a moment, I thought, and as my eyes ranged the room, unconsciously looking for some opportunity to aid me, they lit on a great batch of typewriting on the table. His eyes caught on the look of mine, and without his thinking, followed their direction. As they saw the parcel, he realized my meaning. You do not know me, I said. When you have read these papers, my own diary and my husband's, also which I have typed, you will know me better. I have not faltered in giving every thought of my own heart in this case, but of course, you do not know me yet, and I must not expect you to trust me so far. He is certainly a man of noble nature. Poor dear Lucy was right about him. He stood up and opened a large drawer in which there are arranged in order a number of hollow cylinders, metal covered with dark wax. He said, You are quite right. I did not trust you because I did not know you. But I know you now, and let me say, I should have known long ago. I know that Lucy told you of me. She told me of you too. May I make the only atonement in my power? Take the cylinders and hear them. The first half-dozen of them are personal to me, and they will not horrify you. You will know me better. Dinner will be ready by then. In the meantime, I shall read over some of these documents, and shall be better able to understand certain things. He carried the phonograph himself up to my sitting room, and adjusted it for me. Now I shall learn something pleasant, I am sure, for it will tell me the other side of a true love episode, of which I know one side already. Dr. Seward's diary. 29th of September. I was so absorbed in that wonderful diary of Jonathan Harker, and that other of his wife, that I let the time run on without thinking. Mrs. Harker was not down when the maid came to announce dinner, so I said, She is possibly tired. Let dinner wait an hour. Then I went on with my work. I had just finished Mrs. Harker's diary. When she came in, she looked sweetly pretty and very sad, and her eyes were flushed with crying. This somehow moved me much. Of late I had cause for tears, God knows, but the relief of them was denied me. and now the sight of those sweet eyes, brightened with recent tears, went straight to my heart. So I said as gently as I could, "I greatly fear I have distressed you." "Oh no, not distressed me," she replied. "But I have been more touched, and I can say by your grief. This is a wonderful machine, but it is cruelly true. It told me, in its very tones, the anguish of your heart. It was like a soul crying out to Almighty God. No one must hear them, spoken ever again. See, I have tried to be useful, and copied out the words on my typewriter. None other need hear how your heart beat as I did." No one need ever shall ever know, I said in a low voice. She laid her hand on mine, and said very gravely, "Ah, but they must." "Must? But why?" I asked. "Because it is part of a terrible story, a part of dear Lucy's death, and all that led to it. Because in the struggle which we have before us to rid the earth of this terrible monster, we must all have the knowledge, and all the help which we can get. I think that the cylinders which you gave me contained more than you intended me to know. But I can see that there are in your I can see there are in your record many lights to this dark mystery. You will help me, will you not? I know all up to a certain point. I can see already through your diary. It only took me to 7th September. How poor Lucy was beset, and how her terrible doom was being wrought out. Jonathan and I have been working all day and night since Professor Van Helsing saw us. He has gone to Whitby to get more information, and he will be here tomorrow to help us. We need have no secrets amongst us. Working together with absolute trust, we can surely be stronger if some of us were in the dark." She looked at me so appealingly, at the same time manifested such courage and resolution in her bearing, that I gave in at once to her wishes. "You shall," I said. "Do as you like in the matter. God forbid if I do wrong. There are terrible things yet to learn, but if you have traveled so far traveled on the road to poor Lucy's death, you will not be content. I know to remain in the dark, nay, the end, the very end, may give you a gleam of peace. Come, there is dinner. We must keep one another strong for what is before us. We have a cruel and dreadful task. Before you have eaten, you shall learn the rest, and I shall answer any questions you ask. If there be anything which you do not understand, though it was apparent to us who were present." Mina Harker's journal. I need a drink. Mina Harker's journal. 29th of September. Afternoon, I came with Dr. Seward to his study. He brought back the phonograph to my room, and I took my typewriter. He placed me in a comfortable chair, and arranged the phonograph so I could touch it without getting up, and showed me how to stop it in case I wanted to pause. Then he very thoughtfully took a chair with his back to me, so that I might be as free as possible, and began to read. I put the forked metal to my ears, and listened. When the terrible story of Lucy's death and all that followed was done, I lay back in my chair powerless. Fortunately, I am not of a fainting disposition. When Dr. Seward saw me, he jumped up with a horrified exclamation, and hurriedly taking a case bottle from a cupboard, gave me some brandy, which in a few minutes somewhat restored me. My brain was My brain was all in a whirl. Now, there came through all the multitude of horrors. The holy ray of light that was my dear Lucy was at last at peace. I do not think I could have borne it without making a scene. It was all so wild and mysterious and strange that if I had not known Jonathan's experience at Transylvania, I could not have believed it as it was. I didn't know what to believe, and so got out of my difficulty by attending to do something else. I took the cover off of my typewriter and said to Dr. Seward, let me write all of this out. I'm trying to get it in the middle. Let me write all of this out now. We must be ready for Dr. Van Helsing when he comes. I have sent a telegram to Jonathan to come on here when he arrives in London from Whitby. In this matter, dates are everything, and I think that if we get all of our material ready, we have every item in chronological order, we shall have done much. You tell me that Lord Coldhaming and Mr. Morris are coming too. Let us be able to tell him when they come. He accordingly set the phonograph at a slow pace, and I began to typewrite from the beginning of the 7th cylinder. I used manifold, and so took 3 copies of the diary, just as I had done with all the rest. It was late when I got through, but Dr. Seward went about his work of going his round of the patients. When he had finished, he came back and sat near me, reading so that I did not feel too lonely. Whilst I worked, how good and thoughtful he is. The world seems full of good men, even if there are monsters in it. Before I left him, I remembered what Jonathan put in his diary of the professor's perturbation at reading something in an evening paper, the station at Exeter. So seeing that Dr. Seward keeps his newspapers, I borrowed the files of the Westminster Gazette and the Pall Mall Gazette, and took them to my room. I remember how much the Daily Graph and the Whitby Gazette, of which I had made cuttings, helped me to understand the terrible events at Whitby when Count Dracula landed. So I shall look through the evening papers since then, and perhaps I shall get some new light. I am not sleepy, and the work will keep me quiet. Dr. Seward's diary, 30th of September. Mr. Harker arrived at 9 o'clock. He had got his wife's wire just before starting. He is uncommonly clever, if one can judge from his face, and full of energy. If this journal be true, and judging by one's own wonderful experience, it must be. He is also a man of great nerve that is going down to the ball a second time. It was a remarkable piece of daring, and after reading his account of it, I was prepared to meet a good specimen of manhood, but hardly the quiet, business-like gentleman who came here today. Later, after lunch, Harker and his wife went back to their own room, and I passed a while ago. I heard the click of the typewriter. They are hard at it. Mrs. Harker says that they are dating together in chronological order, every scrap of evidence they have. Mr. Harker has got the letters between the co-signee of the boxes at Whitby and the carriers in London who took charge of them. He is now reading his wife's typescript of my diary. I wonder what they make out of it. Here it is. Strange that it never struck me that the very next house might be the Count's hiding place. Goodness knows have we had enough clues from the conduct of the patient Renfield. The bundle of letters relating to the purchase of the house here with the typescript. Oh, if we had only had them earlier, we might have saved poor Lucy. Stop. That way the madness lies. Harker has gone back and is collating his materials. He says that by dinner time they will be able to show a whole connected narrative. He thinks that in the meantime I should see Renfield, as hitherto he has been sort of an index to the coming and going of the Count. I hardly see this yet, but when I get at the dates, I suppose I shall. What a good thing Mrs. Harker put my cylinders to I never could have found these dates otherwise. I found Renfield sitting placidly in his room, with his hands folded, smiling benignly at the moment. He seemed as sane as anyone I ever saw. I sat down and talked with him a lot of subjects, all of which he treated naturally, and then of his own accord spoke of going home, a subject he has never mentioned to my knowledge during his sojourn here. In fact, he spoke quite confidently of getting his discharge at once. I believe that had I not had the chat with Harker and read the letters and date of his outbursts, I should have been prepared to sign for him. After a brief time of observation, as it is, I am darkly suspicious. All these outbreaks for him. Were in some way linked to the proximity of the Count. What then does this absolute content mean? Can it be that his instincts is satisfied to the vampire's ultimate triumph? Say, he is himself zoophagous, and in his wild ravings outside of chapel door of the deserted house, he always spoke of the master. This all seemed confirmation of our ideas. However, after a while, I came away with my friend just a little too sane at the present to make it safe to probe him too deep with questions. He might begin to think, and then... So I came away. I mistrust these quiet moods of his. So I given the attendant a hint to look closely after him, and to have a straight waistcoat ready in case of need. I need a drink. I'm gonna kill. Ah! Ah! I can't stop hiccuping. The hiccups won't stop. Hey, ちょっと待って。虫が多すぎ。Need to get rid of my plants. I can't stop. Okay. Let's try to continue. Jonathan Harker's journal, 29th of September, train to London. When I received Mr. Billington's courteous message that he would give me any information in his power, I thought it best to go down to Whitby and make on the spot such inquiries as I wanted. It was now my object to trace the horrid cargo of the Count's to his place in London. However, we may be able to deal with it. Billington Jr., a nice lad, met me at the station and brought me to my father's house, to his father's house, where they had decided that I must stay the night. They are hospitable, with true Yorkshire hospitality. Give a guest everything and leave him free to do as he likes. They all knew that I was busy, and that my stay was short, and Mr. Billington had ready in his office all the papers concerning the co-assignment of boxes. It gave me almost a turn to see again of the letters, which I had seen on the Count's table before I knew of his diabolical plans. Everything had been carefully thought out and done systematically and with precision. He seemed to have been prepared for every obstacle which might be placed by accident in the way of his intentions being carried out. To use an Americanism, he had taken no chances, and the absolute accuracy with which his instructions were fulfilled was simply the logical result of his care. I saw that the invoice and took note of 50 cases of comet earth to be used for experimental purposes. Also, a copy of letter to Carter Patterson, and the reply of both of these I got copies. That was all the information Mr. Billington could give me, so I went down to the port and saw the Coast Guards, the customs officers, and the harbor master. They all had something to say of the strange entry of the ship, which is already taking its place in local tradition. But no one could add to the simple description, 50 cases of common earth. I then saw the station master, who kindly put me in communication with the men who had actually received the boxes. The tally was exact with the list, and they had nothing to add except the boxes were main and mortal heavy, and that the shifting them was dry work. One of them added that it was hard lines, that there wasn't any gentleman, such like as yourself, Squire, to show some sort of appreciation for their efforts in liquid form. Another put it in a rider that the thirst then generated was such that even the time which had elapsed had not completely allayed it. Needless to add, I took care before leaving to lift, forever and adequately, this sort of reproach. 30th of September. Okay. 30th September. The station master was good enough to give me a line to his old companion, the station master at King's Cross, so that when I arrived there in the morning, I was able to ask him about the arrival of the boxes. He, too, then put me at once in a communication with the proper officials. I saw that their tally was correct, with the original invoice. The opportunities of acquiring an abnormal thirst had been there limited. Noble use of them had, however, been made, and again I was compelled to deal with the result of ex post facto member. From thence, I went on to Carter Patterson's central office, where I met with the utmost courtesy. They looked up at the transaction in their daybook and letterbook, and at once telephoned to their King's Cross office for more details. By good fortune, the men who did the teaming were waiting for work, and the officials at once sent them over to on-the-way billing and all the papers connected with the delivery of the boxes at Carfax. Here, again, I found the tally agreeing exactly with the carriers, were able to supplement the paucity of the written words with a few details. These were, I shortly found, connected almost solely with the dusty nature of the job, and of the consequent thirst engendered in the operators. On my affording an opportunity through the medium of the currency of the realm of the allaying at a later period, this beneficial evil, one of the men remarked, "That here os governor is the rummiest I've ever was in. Like me, but it ain't been touched since 100 years. Thus I was thick in the place that you might have slept in on it, without earning your bones, and the place that was neglected, that might have smelled old Jerusalem in it. But the old chapel that took it, you know, mate, we thought we'd never get out quick enough, Lore. I wouldn't take less nor a quid a moment to say, after dark." Having been in the house, I could have believed him. But if he knew what I knew he would, I think he would have raised his terms. Of one thing, I am now satisfied that all the boxes derived at Whitby from Varna in the Demeter were safely deposited in the old chapel at Carfax. There should be 50 of them there, unless any have since been removed. As from Dr. Seward's diary, I fear. I shall try to see the carter who took them away the boxes from Carfax. When Redfield attacked them, by following this clue, we may learn a good deal. Later, Mina and I have worked all day, and we have all put the papers in order. Mina Harker's journal. 30th of September. I am so glad that I hardly know how to contain myself. It is, I suppose, the reaction from the haunting fear which I have had, that this terrible affair and the reopening of his old wound might act detrimentally on Jonathan. I saw him leave for Whitby with as brave as a face as I could, but it was sick with apprehension. The effort, however, has done him good. He was never so resolute, never so strong, never so full of volcanic energy as at Prenderson. It is just as that dear good Professor Van Helsing said, he is true grit, and he improves under strain that would kill a weaker nature. He came back full of life and hope, determination. We have got everything in order for tonight. I feel myself quite wild with excitement. I suppose one ought to pity anything so hunted as his account. That is just it. This thing is not human, not even the beast. To read Dr. Seward's account of poor Lucy's death and what followed is enough to dry up the springs of pity in one's heart. Later, Lord Godalming and Mr. Morris arrived earlier than we expected. Dr. Seward was out on business and had taken Jonathan with him, so I had to see them. It was to me a painful meeting, for it brought back all the poor dear Lucy's hopes of only a few months ago. Of course, they had heard Lucy speak of me, and it seemed that Dr. Van Helsing, too, has been quite blowing my trumpet, as Mr. Morris expressed it. Poor fellows, neither of them is aware that I know all about the proposals they have made to Lucy. They did not quite know what to say or do, as they were ignorant of the amount of my knowledge. So they had to keep on neutral subjects. However, I thought the matter over and over and came to the conclusion that the best thing I could do would be to post them in affairs right up to date. I knew from Dr. Seward's diary that they had been at Lucy's death, her real death, and they had not feared to betray any secret before time. So I told them, as well as I could, that I had read all the papers and diaries, and that my husband and I, having typewritten them, had just finished putting them in order. I gave them each a copy to read in the library. Dr. Goldaming got his and turned it over. It does make a pretty good pile. He said, "Did you write all this, Mrs. Harker?" I nodded, and he went on, "I don't quite see the drift of it, but you people are also good and kind, and have been working so earnestly and so energetically that all I can do is accept your ideas blindfold and try to help you. I have had one lesson already in accepting facts, and I should make a man humble to the last hour of his life. Besides, I know you love my poor Lucy." Here he turned away and covered his face with his hand. I could hear the tears in his voice. Mr. Morris, with instinctive delicacy, just laid a hand for a moment on his shoulder, and then walked quietly out of the room. I suppose that there is something in a woman's nature that makes man free to break down before her and express his feelings on the tender, emotional side without feeling it derogatory to his manhood. But when Lord Goldaming found himself alone with me, he sat down on the sofa and gave way utterly and openly. I sat down beside him and took his hand. I hope he didn't think it forward of me, and if he ever thinks it afterward, he never will have such a thought. Dare I wrong him? I know he never will. He is true a gentleman, I said to him, for I could see that his heart was breaking. I love dear Lucy, and I know what she was to you, and what you were to her. She and I were like sisters, and now she is gone. Will you not let me be like a sister to you in your trouble? I know what sorrows you have, though I cannot measure the depth of them. If sympathy and pity can help you in your affliction, here you let me be of some little service to you, for Lucy's sake." In an instant, the poor dear fellow was overwhelmed with grief. It seemed to me that all he had of late had been suffering in silence, found a vent at once. He grew quite hysterical, and raising his open hands, beat his palm together in a perfect agony of grief. He stood up, and then sat down again, and the tears rained down on his cheek. I felt infinite pity for him, and opened my arms unthinkingly. With a sob, he laid his head on my shoulder and cried like a wearied child. Lucy shook with emotion. We women have something of the mother in us that makes us rise above smaller matters. When the mother spirit is invoked, I felt this big sorrowing man's head resting on me, as though if it were that of a baby that some day may lie on my bosom. I stroked his hair as though he were my own child. I never thought it at the time how strange it all was. After a little bit of his sobs ceased, he raised himself with an apology, though he made no disguise of his emotion. He told me that for days and nights past, weary days and sleepless nights, he had been unable to speak with anyone, as a man must speak of in his own time of sorrow. There was no woman whose sympathy could be given to him, with whom, owing to the terrible circumstance with which his sorrow was surrounded, he could speak freely. I know now how I suffered, he said as he dried his eyes, but I do not know even yet, and none other can even know, how much your sweet sympathy has been me today. I shall know better in time, and believe me that, though I am not ungrateful now, my gratitude will grow with my understanding. You will let me be like a brother to you, will you not? For all our lives, for dear Lucy's sake, for dear Lucy's sake. As I said, we clasped hands. And for your own sake, he added, for if a man's esteem and gratitude are ever worth winning, and you have won mine today, if ever the future, you should bring to you a time when you need a man's help. Believe me, you will not call in vain. God grant that no such time may ever come to you to break the sunshine of your life. But if it should ever come, promise me that you will let me know. He was so earnest and his sorrow was so fresh that I felt it would comfort him, so I said, I promise. As I came along the corridor, I saw Mr. Morris looking out of a window. He turned as he heard my footsteps. How is Hart? He said, then noticing my red eyes, he went on, Ah, I see you have been comforting him. Poor old fellow. He needs it. No one but a woman can help a man when he is in trouble of the heart. He had no one to comfort him. He bore his own troubles so bravely that my heart bled for him. I saw the manuscript in his hand, and I knew that when he had read it, he would realize how much I knew. So I said to him, I wish I could comfort all who suffer from the heart. Will you not let me be your friend, and will you come to me for comfort if you need it? You will know later on why I speak. He saw that I was in earnest, and stooping, took my hand, and raising it to his lips, kissed it, and it seemed to but pour comfort to so brave and unselfish a soul. And impulsively, I bent over and kissed him. The tears rose in his eyes, and there was a momentary choking in his throat. He said quite calmly, Little girl, you will never regret this true-hearted kindness, so long as you live. Then he went to the study to his friend. Little girl, the very words he had used to Lucy. And oh, but he proved himself a friend. Okay. I'll make sure I'm in the right chapter. Wait. Oh. That's the wrong one. Yeah, this is it. Okay. ここで終了します。それで end here. 今日も見てくれてありがとうございます。次回も見に来てくれるとありがたい. Thank you for watching today and I hope to see you next time too. Gracias por mirar. Espero que venga a verme la próxima vez. では、クレジット。見てくれてありがとう。ローム、てくれてありがとう。Thank you for watching. Thank you for lurking. I can bookmark this. I can get back to it later. We'll close out that and make sure it's on the right chapter. Okay. So it works. Eva! Studio, お疲れ. Bye bye!